first question to Minister Lee. The first case of Zika. Can you tell us where this person traveled to, if that is allowed?
At this point, no.
My second question, I would like to put it to Mr. Myers. The situation regarding Tessie and the lien, and I would like to be very specific with the question because I'd like specific answers. When was the letter sent by the former minister to Tessie NV telling them that they're allowed to develop the parking space in Simpson Bay? Was it after September 30th, 2015? And was it after the motion was passed in Parliament informing or giving ministers at the time an instruction not to engage in anything new?
Well, I would have to research that, but I know indeed it was after the 30th. And I know the last letter Tessie received from the former minister was on November 18th, so the day before they left the office.
You also mentioned that you're going to proceed with this project, and if there is any hiccup or holdup, the former minister, can be held personally liable. Minister Myers, I've heard this statement throughout the 1.5 month of stalemate that St. Martin was put through when the former government refused to leave office. Up to now, no minister have been held liable, even though they have done a lot of things, especially within the Ministry of Romy. Are you serious in taking this by holding this minister liable?
Well, I'm serious in terms of this project is something on a priority list to move forward. And if all kind of political games will be played to stalemate this project, then I'm serious on looking at ways where the former minister can be held liable.
VP, thank you very much for your questions. Andrew Dick, the Daily Herald, you have the floor.
Good morning, ministers. Minister Myers, the parking lot, I noticed that the machines are working now. Can you tell us a little bit about it?
Well, right now that is like a dry run.
Oh,
It's
okay.
just testing of the machines and things. The formal opening will be coming soon, but it's just like a test phase right now.
Okay, so it hasn't officially started.
It has not been officially opened. No.
Okay, and also the Walter Plans Pier, the much talked about parking lot from the harbor. Any plans presented yet on that to your ministry? Because you said the last time you said that they didn't present any plans as yet.
They did not present any plans, and the discussions I have had with the CEO of the harbor, those plans to provide parking there on the beach has been abandoned, and the harbor is looking for other alternatives for parking in the area.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Andrew, thank you for your questions. Alita Singh, Daily Herald, you have the floor.
Good morning. Thank you, Cedric. Good morning, ministers. Minister Myers, the Vorse land, I think the last time you were at the press briefing 2 weeks ago, you said you were working with a work group, so to speak, with APS.
Yeah.
What's the progress on that?
The progress is the work group had their first meeting, I think probably last week or the week before. And a follow-up meeting is planned for, according to me, next week. I'm not sure, but I'll have to look. But the APS would come forward with certain proposals on an action plan on the way moving forward, and that will be then be up for discussions and the next step.
Okay, thank you. Minister Gibson, the Division of Assets and Liabilities, is there any update on that process that Curaçao basically wanted to have a reassessment of the numbers? Has that reassessment been done, and what's the stage now?
No, it's the process or the status of it is the same. We were attempting to get a meeting with the Minister of Finance of Curaçao as well as the representative of Holland, to move this process forward, to make certain we can get our share of the funds, at least in advance on it this year yet.
Okay. And on the, we're at the last 2 weeks, I believe, for collection of road tax. Do you have any idea of the number, the amount that's been collected so far?
No, I have not gotten a report yet as to how much road taxes have been collected by the receiver of taxes for 2016 as yet. As you know, I think they're still distributing number plates, so that information is not yet available.
So you're not really aware yet if we're reaching the target?
No, I think it's a little too early to expect that.
Thank you.
Leader, thank you for your questions. Bibi Hodge, you have the floor.
Thank you, Cedric. Minister Meyer, Minister Jacobs, you know, when you have archives and you have statements made by certain politicians that live a life, and of course I have a very good archive, when the NAGICO chairman, Mr. Maxud, wanted to build a cricket stadium, I think on the Pawn Island next to the Little League, it was stated that was an English sport. It has nothing to do with St. Martin's. Does that change the perspective now that a St. Martina has made history in Bangladesh? What is your views on having a proper cricket stadium built in St. Martin to occupy our youths?
I'm sure, Bibi, that your archive will reflect that I did not make that statement, so I do not take any responsibility for that. If we go back to our elders, we will know that cricket has been played on St. Martin before many of the other sports. And because we've always had a steady influx of immigrants from English countries, it has always continued to flourish, despite government's lack of sponsorship, participation, or the like. So I am not sitting here now to refute what may or may not have been said. I'm not responsible for any of that. I do know that this ministry has as its priority to promote sports on St. Martin. Initially, in the past few years, the focus was on 7 sports. Cricket has continued to thrive on St. Martin and continues to thrive on St. Martin, regardless of not having a extraordinary large, up-to-date stadium. If any would go back in history, they will also know that Usain Bolt started on a dirt track as well. So from humble beginnings, much can be done, and it is the goal of the ministry to continue to look for ways to be able to have that cricket stadium in St. Martin. If we go back in history, you'll see that the government or the governments which I have supported in the past have always had this as part of our priority, but never had the opportunity to execute it. I do not believe, and I can state this publicly, that we should be filling any more of the pond in. So in the past, we have looked at other options, and we will continue to look at other options to be able to exploit a cricket field on St. Martin, not just for cricket on St. Martin, but because of the whole international aspect as well, and possibilities for sports tourism, as well as in all our other facilities. But we know that financing is always an issue. Mr. Maxud is still the chairman of the Cricket Association, and of course, of his personal, of the private company, which continues to be a force. But we cannot also forget that Scotiabank has continued to sponsor kiddie cricket. And even when I was a teacher, several trainers would come to the school in the afternoons and work with our students to teach them cricket. So because of private investments in this sport, it has continued to thrive. Government now has to step up to the plate, and we are willing to do so.
Thank you for that explanation, Minister Jacob. Minister Gibson, I would ask you this first before I ask you the question. Are you the deputizing Minister of Justice?
Minister,
Justice.
yes, I am.
Okay, so then you're the right person. On Monday afternoon, a convicted killer escaped from prison guards while leaving a medical clinic. We tried to get information. Was he shackled? How did he get hold of a firearm? Information is not forthcoming. I do not know if the prison director is still in active duty. If he's active or inactive, he can never be reached. But what is the Council of Ministers doing, or as you, as the deputizing Minister of Justice, to have this matter properly investigated? There have been a number of cases at the prison which just fall, you hear about it, and then it's finished. It's a dead deal. So what is going to happen in this case?
Well, Bibi, I'm sorry to disappoint you in not being able to answer any of those questions. You do know that a deputy is a deputy, and the deputy only takes the position he's deputizing for when that particular minister is not on the island. As long as that minister is on the island, he takes charge of everything that concerns his ministry. So I'm unfortunately not aware, not informed of anything that occurred relative to the issue that you brought up. The Minister of Justice who is dealing with that, and the Council of Ministers still has to get a report from him. Yesterday, he did not attend the Council of Ministers meeting because he was dealing with that specific issue. So a formal report has not reached the Council of Ministers yet regarding those occurrences.
Shocking. Do I have my third question, Cedric?
You got it.
Minister Gibson again. Last week in a press conference, you announced the 2-week postponement to before the budget can be heard in Parliament.
I'm sorry, I'm not hearing you.
I said last week in a press briefing, a press conference, you announced about the postponement of the plenary session
Yes.
for the budget, and you gave all the reasons why. Do you think that was too much of a time? Would it take that amount of time to get these figures together and to do what the CFT wants in order to approve the budget?
Yes, it's not too much time, perhaps it's a little short.
It's a little short.
Yes. Let me explain to you, this government took office on November the 19th, and immediately, of course, there were certain activities. There was an instruction on the table that the budget had to be ready December 15th, which was quite impossible for a new government to get the entire budget prepared by December 2015. So I requested an extension until January 31st, which in itself was quite a challenge to be able to do it by January 31st. The consequence of that is that the capacity that you have in your finance department, they all hands on to try to meet the deadline of January 31st. So you use all that capacity only working on trying to produce the budget in time for that extended deadline. Of course, in that process, there are other things that normally are done were set aside to be able to get the budget done in time. So I also got to mention to you that as a rule, the last quarter of any year normally is not included. The last quarter of it normally is not included in any budget projection. The law says that by September of each year, the budget has to be presented. In this case, it was not. And coming in after November the 19th and asking for the extension to January 31st, it just so happened by accident that you cross that date deadline of December 31st, 2015. And of course, everybody's curious, well, what happened the last quarter? But normally, every budget that was passed before, they only went on the basis of the first 3 quarters of the year. But in this particular case, since we've passed the January 1st dateline, the CFT and even some members of parliament were inquiring about the numbers of the last quarter of 2015. So the decision was made by me, we're going to produce it. So as we sit here, the capacity that I have in the finance department is pulling out all plugs in order to produce those numbers for the CFT. And from that point of view, 2 weeks is a short time.
VP, thank you very much for your questions. Andrew Dick, Daily Herald, you have the floor.
Yeah, Minister Jacobs, just an update on NEPA. I know for sure that's been discussed every week. What's the latest? Have you received the financials finally?
Thank you for that question. I believe last week I mentioned that, or the week before,
The week
that
before.
the
The
financials were submitted and that the SOB will still be conducting the
Oh.
investigation as the financials were not complete. They were not audited as expected. Also, I'll be having a meeting today, later today, with the board.
Oh, yeah? Okay.
So that can be with who is left of the board, I must say, because there have been several resignations. And so, moving forward, I think it actually works in our favor to be able to get a new board in place. So we are working together with the board. They are trying to really bring forward most of the other reports that had been due and other requirements that the Department of Education and Inspection has been requesting of them. Of course, not everything is in, but in the interest of continuity of the institution, we are looking to make the transition as quickly and as seamless as possible. Of course, not forgetting and not ignoring the fact that of liability, if and when that is proven of any type of mismanagement. So we are still in the discussion phases with them. It seems a bit more positive at this time, and so I look forward to being able to reassure the general public that we are indeed able to have the institution fulfill the need for which it was established. As a matter of fact, I recently heard a broadcast on the radio questioning what and making some assumptions as to what NEPA was established for, and I'd like to clarify that. The National Institute for Professional Advancement was not established as a dropout program. It's established as a continuing program after VSBO. SBO is a tertiary level advanced vocational education, and because of how our system is, students who graduate from the VSBO levels, which are currently at SVOBE, which is Sundial and the Milton Peters College, and those students from Academy PSVE, they do not automatically qualify to go to college. They have ended that level of education. Normally, they can segue into what was formerly the academics, the HAVO or the academic at St. Martin Academy or St. Dominic. Some of them, though, might be older and more willing to do vocational studies or may not qualify for the totally academic studies based on their learning styles and their interests. So in order to continue in the vocational streams, the SBO has existed, MBO, SBO, levels 1 and 2, and levels 3 and 4. What has happened in the past is that some students who may have dropped out of whether it's academic levels or whatever and are 18 years old have tried to filter through there. The department or the ministry has had youth development programs where they were assisting young people to get certifications, etc. in the past. So they try to merge those things in the past, I believe, and maybe that's where the idea came about. But NIPA was the National Institute for Professional Advancement, was originally established for certification on levels 1, 2, 3, and 4 in various vocational areas, which have been expounded on many, many times before. The open house, which was planned last year, did go off, and so many of the stakeholders were able to see, and students were able to see what could be done there. So we have a nice development, a nice school, but right now the issue was with the structure in terms of how it's being disseminated, and that's where the questions came into play. That's where delays occurred for students to graduate and get their certificates in time. However, belatedly, the group of RNs and LPNs that had, complained were able to complete. Several programs have had to readjust, etc. So it's an ongoing process, which we hope with new management and leadership that we will be able to reach the goals which we had hoped to achieve from the inception.
How many resignations did you get or did you know about?
We received notification as a ministry that the representative of our ministry had resigned, as well as the chairperson.
Okay. The CXC, I don't know if you're aware, the Milton Peters College recently announced that they will be offering CXC for the upcoming school year. Do you support that notion?
We have not had any meetings with the Milton Peters College or SVOBE on this topic, and I look forward to having those discussions to see the reasoning behind it, as well as the validation of it. We already have CXC schools, and I have a vision that is, yes, we need to provide more opportunities in English as well for our students, because we are feeding more English students out of the elementary schools who are not qualifying for the Dutch schools. That needs to be assessed, of course, because the idea was not to be that way. So that's why we are having an analysis of the system, and as such, we will have the discussions with the school board.
You look forward to those discussions?
I look forward to
Thank
those
you,
school boards,
Andrew.
but I refrain from giving any personal opinion at this time.
Thank you, Andrew. Alita Singh, you have the floor.
Thank you, Cedric. Minister Myers, the sewage plant, the one that was to be put in the land, but the land close to the causeway, has there been any update on that? I think the last time we spoke, you talked about probably getting a land somewhere by Tropicana Casino. This is remember we had the land swap from Tessie NV. We were going to get the land to make a sewage plant.
Yeah. At the moment, we're still exploring different possibilities. There is discussions slated for this Friday, February 19th, with our French counterparts. And so there's different options, and we're just discussing the different options that we have and what will be the best for both parties.
Is there any limitation or time expiration on the money that we can access for this project?
Not that I am aware of.
And a final question on the cadastre. During the parliament meeting, you were asked about how many members are on the board of the cadastre at the moment. I think you said two. I cannot remember correctly.
Yep.
If that number is only two, that means the board is not completely legal. What is being done to fix that board at the moment?
Well, right now we are in the process, and there's a procedure for appointing new board members.
Mhm.
And right now we are in the procedure of putting additional board members to the cadastre.
Thank
So
you.
that is a work in progress.
Thank you very much.
Alita, thank you very much for your questions. Any follow-ups?
Yes, thank you, Cedric. Mr. Jacobs, gave some lengthy explanations of NEPA to the questions my colleague posted. What is the situation with the lien that was placed by an employee on...
Use your microphone, Bibi.
Sorry.
Pose the question again, please.
Can you tell me, my colleague asked a lot of questions about the NEPA situation. I remember last week, I think it was, or the week before, you mentioned an employee had placed a lien on NEPA, the building. Can you tell us what the situation with that whole lien business? Did the lawyer go through that? Where are we?
As such, that information was not brought forward to me, but I do know that the employees of the institute were paid, because apparently the amount of the lien was not the amount of their account, but the whole account had been frozen. So once the bank had cleared up that problem, that the employees could be paid, however, they were paid late. So whether the lien was paid or not, I don't have any insight. That is not within me.